Yeah, good evening, everyone. So, yes, today we discussed about how two-way binding works. One simple concept of working with two-way binding. Yeah. So, in two-way binding, what is the concept we learned? How two-way binding is managed by Angular using MVC approach. Data binding using MVC. So, there is another technique. Actually, Angular can handle data binding using MVVM approach. It supports both MVC and MVVM approach. MVC is model view controller. MVVM is model view model. So this is also a design pattern. MVVM is also a design pattern. Already I told you software architectural patterns, so many are there. In data binding, Angular MVC, it uses MVC. Another approach is MVVM. So what is MVVM approach is, see, MVVM approach is, there is no controller involvement in MVVM. Actually, you will have model. So model, already we know that it represents data. We usually have a model, and actually model represents data. In this model, generally, so the model comprises of all the data. Generally, this data goes to controller. But this time, what happens is, without controller, we usually have a view. This model data need to be displayed in the view, means UI. The model data need to be displayed in the view. View is UI. Now from here, data is coming to controller, and from controller it is going to the view. Again, from view it comes to controller and it manages. But this time there will be no controller. Without controller, here we can manage. So here we can manage a view model. We can manage a view model. This view model is responsible for handling directly the interaction with the model. Actually, this view model is, it is a part of this view only. That means view model is actually part. It is a part of view only. So view model is a part of this view. That means you can say it is a part of this view. That means view model is a combination of view, and inside the view itself, some data is maintained. Inside the view, the data is maintained actually. This is view model. This is view model. Inside the view model, directly data can be handled and managed here. This is what actually the approach, how it works. So the view and the view model. That means we don't need a controller. In the UI itself, it will maintain some memory. In the memory, it will store the data and it will handle updates. It will handle updates. Actually, this is managed by a controller. That means what happens in our project, we will have controller. Controller is this TS file. Now here, whatever happens, the update will come to controller. From controller, again it's sent to the UI. But now this controller will not be in picture. That means you don't need to do anything related to data inside TS file. You can directly access the data from UI and display, and you can directly manage the update into that location without the involvement of controller. Generally, for which situation this is suitable and good? I already told you we have inline documentation technique. In inline documentation technique, what happens? User interface, styles, and logic all are present in one file. Understood? If all are present in one file, there is no clean separation of UI, data, and logic. In such situations, we use MVVM approach. MVC approach is good if your application component have a clean separation of UI, logic, and the styles. If all are present in one file, we already learned inline documentation. If all are present in one file, then it is simply handled in the UI itself. That means you don't need to use any controller. The approach is called as, we call this approach as MVVM. Actually, MVVM is nothing but it is an architectural pattern. Architectural pattern. Architectural pattern. So that handles communication between model and the view by using view model instead of controller. So it is model. That means what it stands for. It is model and view and view model. That is what actually model, view, and view model. What is model? Model comprises of data. Model comprises of data. View describes the UI, user interface, and view model is memory allocated for data inside view. Memory allocated for data inside view without any controller. Without any controller. That is what actually view model is. So it is going to manage everything through this view model. Now, for which situation it is good? So it is good for components which are using inline design technique. Inline design technique, code behind design technique. Two things we learn. If it is using inline technique, then this looks easy and good. I will show you how it works. How to configure view model? We will see one example. How do we configure the view model? We will see one example. Same example we will try to create by using a view model. See, actually, even you have the code behind technique also. That means, so you can use MVVM in code behind components. So that controller burden is reduced. Controller burden is reduced. But one problem is there. What is the problem? If you try to manage everything in UI, then UI becomes heavy. That means rendering will be slow, responding will be slow, output generation will be slow, because everything you are designing in UI. If UI is heavy, then it will become slow. So if you need any simple interactions without any controller, then better you can go with MVVM approach. MVVM approach. Let's see how it works. If you see, then you can easily understand this. See, to configure this MVVM approach, what is the intention I'm telling? See, lot of logic is written here. We have to create a contract. We need to define the types. We need to configure lot of things in the controller. But see how it becomes easy now. I will create one component here. Let's add a component. Open in integrated terminal. I will generate ng generate component MVVM demo. Okay. Skip test. I am adding MVVM demo component. I'm not using inline. You can use inline. I'm just using code behind, but we will reduce the work of controller, right? Let's see now. Here we will go to MVVM demo HTML. See, nothing we are doing in this PS file. We are not declaring even a memory also. Previously, to store name, we need a reference in memory that need to be created here. We are not doing that also here. Directly go to HTML. In HTML, here we are creating the design. Let's say div and yeah. And in this class container fluid, just I will keep a simple div and class as row. In this we have a div class as call3, just like yesterday design. I will keep a data list, data term name, and data definition input type is equal to text. Another data term is price. Another data definition input type is equal to text. Okay, and another is so city. So here we have data definition input type is equal. We will put a drop down, right? We'll put a drop down and the option as Delhi. So option as Hyderabad, like this. Now here we will define another data term. So that is a stock, and we will put a text box. Input type is equal to checkbox. So available, like this. We can use all the effects and all. Simply I'm configuring like this. Now observe in the second column. So div another class, the column some 9. So here we will put a simple heading as this is a register product, and in the right side I will display product details. So product details. That means our concept is what details entered we need to collect and display. So localhost. So this is what we need to do. We need to keep our startup, right? MVVM demo we will keep in startup. Let's go to module.ts. In the startup we will keep MVVM demo. In index, so this is app MVVM demo. App MVVM demo. So let's run. Okay, it is same. Now right side we want to display the details. So we will put here a data list, data term, so name, data definition. Another data term price, data definition. Another is city, and here we have data definition. Another we have stock and data definition. Okay. Now this is fine. I want to display the details there. Now whatever the details entered in the text boxes, in the drop down, in the checkbox, we need to collect and display here. So what was yesterday's architecture? MVC. In MVC, first you have to create a reference for all these in your TS file. That means in the controller, we need to maintain references to store the data coming from name, to store the data coming from price. We need to create an object. We created that. But now, no need to maintain memory in controller separately. We can maintain the memory in the UI itself. You can maintain the memory in the UI itself. How? How we can do that? See. So now I want the value of this text box to be collected. How Angular can collect the value of text box, any element, and store in the UI memory, how it will store in the view memory, how it will store in the view memory. For that, some rules are there. First rule, if you want to make this dynamic so that Angular can access the value of this element, then we have to mark it as ng model. We have to mark it as ng model. When you mark it ng model, now Angular can take control. Angular cannot take control of any element if it is not defined with model. So it's mandatory that every element should have ng model. So let's put this everywhere. ng model. Drop down also ng model. This checkbox also ng model. Okay. That is the first rule. That means in MVVM approach, which element you want to handle, that element need to be configured with ng model. Second rule. That means what is the first rule? I will tell rule here. That means configuring elements to use in MVVM. Configuring elements to use in MVVM approach. For that first point, first rule is every HTML element must have ng model configured as attribute. Must have ng model configured as attribute. That means input type is equal to text. We have to set ng model. Suppose there is a drop down. That means we have to set ng model. This is first rule. That means every element must have that ng model. The elements that you want to use, they must be configured with ng model. Okay. Next, second step. Second step is Angular can collect the data of any element only when it is having a name. Every element should have a name. Compulsory. Already you know this. I hope you learned in HTML. In HTML you learned form cannot submit data of any element if there is no name. You learned it, right? You know the form rules. Form cannot submit any element data if there is no name. It is mandatory that when you design any form element, it should have a name. It should have a name. Otherwise, it cannot submit. I hope you already know this rule. See, suppose if you don't know, I will show you that point here. Suppose you are designing a HTML form. In the form, we have username and there is a text box, input type text, and there is a button, and the button is a submit. And let's see here. Actually, text box is not having a name. If text box is not having a name, I entered some name and click on submit. Form cannot submit its value. You see, it is empty. Form can submit the value of any element only when it have a name. That means for this text box, we have to put a name, user name. Now you can see I entered some name and click on submit. Now it can submit. So form cannot submit the data of any element if there is no name. That is a very plain basic HTML rule actually. So that means every element, every HTML element must have a reference name, must have a reference name in order to submit its value. It must have a reference name in order to submit its value. So input type is text, ng model, and name is equal to some name, some username, something like this. Like suppose we have select ng model and name is equal to some city. Like this we can have. And remember, already you know in HTML there is no order dependency for attribute. There is no order dependency for attribute means you can write any attribute anywhere. It must be inside the tag. That means first name after that model or first model after that name. It doesn't matter. You can write any attribute any place. Okay. Now two rules are important. Every element should have ng model. Every element should have a name. Let's fulfill the second rule also. Let's go into our markup, and for every element name, this is name, that is product name. Okay, what is another name? This is price. Okay, what is this name? This name is city. Okay, what is this checkbox name? Its name is stock. Okay, for all of them reference names are defined. That is fine. Okay, now what ng model will do? Ng model will allocate memory for this element. Ng model is going to allocate memory for this element. Memory for this element. Then where the memory is allocated? In the browser memory. In the browser memory, it will allocate some space. Then that space should have a reference name. Am I right? That means ng model is allocating memory for all of them. Then how do we know this belongs to name, this belongs to price, this belongs to city? That means what ng model is going to do? Ng model is going to allocate a memory for all these elements. But all these elements are present in model memory, then they should have a reference name. This name is not reference name. This name is not reference name. Name, price, name, city, they are not reference names for Angular. These are the reference names for form. Form submission related reference names. They are not the reference names used by model. Model will not use these reference names. So the point here is, third point is, ng model will not use HTML names. HTML name will not use HTML name to access element. It requires a reference name. It requires a reference name in memory, reference name in memory defined with hash, hash and name. That means ng model will not use the name directly. You cannot access that. Name is only for HTML to submit the value. So now we need to do one more work. That means what ng model is doing, it is allocating memory. It is allocating memory for this particular element. In that memory, all values are there. Name will be there, price will be there. Then for everybody, we need a separate reference. So how do we define that? Input type is equal to text, ng model, name is equal to username. Now what model have to do is, model need a reference name. So the reference name is defined with hash. Hash username is equal to ng model. That is how we define. Is equal to ng model. That means in the model, that means this model is assigned with which reference? Reference username. That means in the model memory, this text box related value is stored under which ID? Hash means ID. Hash refers to ID na? You know. Hash refers to ID. What does that means? It means that it must be unique. Am I right? There cannot be any another element having the same ID. ID reference means it must be unique. It must be unique. So model have to use a reference to store the data coming from this element. So now what model is doing? Model is using the reference name called username. And very important rule is here, reference name of model and element name must match. That means model reference name, element name, both should match. Element name cannot be different from the reference name of model, because for both of them memory is allocated by the form. In that case, it is compulsory that reference name of model and element name must match. That means suppose you given, so hash uname, so suppose say uname, hash uname is equal to ng model, and you defined name is equal to username like this, then this is invalid. Understood? This is invalid. That means hash username is equal to ng model. The same name should be used by here also, username. Understood? This is valid. This is the process you need to do. These all rules we have to follow. Any one concept you missed, it will not work. That means it is mandatory to configure model. It is mandatory to configure name. It is mandatory to configure a reference ID. And it is mandatory to attach the reference ID to the model so that it can store the data in that reference. These all are very important for MVVM approach. So for every element I need to do this now. Let's go. Okay, so what we have to do for name, already name is defined, then we will use hash. What is it? Name is equal to ng model. And here hash, what is it? Price is equal to ng model. Okay, here hash, what is it? City is equal to ng model. Here we have hash stock is equal to ng model. That's how we need to define. I already told you there is no order dependency. Anything, anywhere you can write there. Okay, now it is ready. It is ready. Now, what are the memory reference names? Memory reference names are name, price, these things. Now, very important is here. So next point is you can access any model reference. You can access any model reference with various attributes. What does that mean? It is nothing but every model reference returns various values. Every model reference returns various values. So many things it will return. What are the values returned by a model reference? Actually, model reference returns so many. What is model reference? Model reference is username. Na? This is model reference, username, price. These are model reference. They will return so many values like dot value. Dot value is nothing but it returns the value present. So value contained. Understood? That means what is the value present in that particular element. If it is a text box, what is the value in text box? If it is a drop down, what is the value of drop down? If it is a checkbox, what is its checked property? Is it true or false? It can access that by using what value. That means the value contained for any element you can access through value. Not only that, it has so many things. Username dot valid, like username dot invalid, like username dot pristine, like username dot dirty, like username dot touched, like username dot untouched. Like this, so many will be there. All others are used later when we are learning validations. Others we will see later. Currently, we need only value. What is valid, what is invalid, pristine, situation wise in a separate validation concept, you will understand. I just showed you so many things. Username, yeah? Username, you have like username will have errors. So many attributes are provided. Attributes are provided. Currently, we don't need all of them. We need only one. What is it? Value. We need only one value. So see now what we are doing here. Let's see, for every element we mentioned everything perfectly. Okay, now just where to display name. Here we have to display name. You put a binding expression. Binding expression. You access the reference. What is it? So reference is what? Name. Name dot value. I am accessing value. Now important, in the TS file, go to TS file and see, is there any reference for them? In TS file, nothing. There is no reference for any element that we are using. The TS file is not touched. There is nothing inside it related to what data you are dealing with. Then, and you see now, similarly, price, we will use, what is it? Price dot value. What is city? City is what? So city dot value. What is another one? Stock. Stock is a boolean. That means we will use stock dot value is equal to true. Understood? If it is true, then we will put available. Available. Otherwise, we will put out of stock. That's what we are defining. Now see here, when this is launched here, you see I'm entering the name. All are working fine. There is no reference. There is no reference here inside controller. That's good. That looks very good. Yesterday we created a contract. We created a product type using that contract. We binded that to the text boxes by using two-way binding technique. What is it? Square brace, parenthesis in that NG model. Now, no need of that. But still, who is responsible for change detection, updating the changes? Who is responsible for that? Model is responsible. And model view, there is no controller. There is no controller here. That means directly the data is managed in the view. What is good about this is you can reduce the usage of controller. Then if you are reducing the usage of controller, that means its performance will be better. But one drawback will be there. If your UI is very heavy already, and you are managing all these interactions also in UI, then it becomes slow. So if simple interactions are present, not complex operations, simple data is required, then you can go with which architecture? MVVM. You can use MVVM approach. You can use MVC. Here, no need of any controller, but you will face problems now. Suppose on button click, I need to manage. Then where to write button click? We can write button click also in the UI itself, because in JavaScript, like we write script element. By using that, we can manage, but that is not recommended. Not recommended. Only to handle simple interactions, validations, client side. Then better you can go with this approach. Mostly we follow this for simple binding without much events. We use mostly for validations. Currently, I showed you only value. We use this even for validations. Later we will learn about validations and all. Currently, I am showing you only this value. There are so many others for model reference. What is it? Valid, invalid, pristine, dirty. Actually, based on that, we can display different messages. So that you are going to learn in later stage. But currently, to handle MVVM approach, all these are mandatory. What are mandatory? Let's see the summary. First, every element must need a model. So what is the purpose of using this model? It makes the static DOM into dynamic. That means it makes this static text box into dynamic. After making it dynamic, it should have a reference name, because form cannot submit its data to any framework without the name. So name is compulsory. After that, in the memory to store the data coming from this particular element, you need a ID. That ID is defined here. The ID name should match with whose name? Element name. ID name should match with element name. And this ID is the memory allocated for the model. In the model, memory allocated. So that ID you have to configure. Then it is ready. Then it is ready. How to access? Simple. By using which property? Value. We can refer to the ID by using value. By using value, it can define it. Actually, lot of other interactions we can do. So by using some techniques. Others later I will tell you, because for that we need to learn some more concept, right? Initially, data binding is handled by using two frameworks, two framework approaches. That is MVC, another one MVV, right? So this example I will give you. In this, we need to just do only one work. What is one file only now? So add a component, a new component. We added a component, ng generate component. What is the component name? MVVM demo. That is the component. And after adding the component MVVM demo demo.component.html. No need to do anything in your TS file. Everything in just HTML. In HTML, all this logic will come. This everything I will copy there. You don't need to declare even a single property in controller. Right? You don't need to declare. So you can manage everything. Sometimes you freshers will have a doubt like, then we can delete the TS file. You cannot delete the TS file, because TS file is the connector for loading the HTML. You need a TS file. So generally what we do, because component itself is a TS file. Generally, this type of approach is good when you are using inline technique. In inline technique, what happens? TS file, HTML, CSS, all are present in one place. Then it will be more easy there, right? As of now, you need a TS file compulsory, but that is not used for your data. That is used only to support the component. For component loading, for component reference only, that TS file is required. But your data is not managed or manipulated inside the control. Inside the controller, everything is managed inside the UI, user interface. This is MVVM approach. So data binding, we have learned two techniques. So by MVC, another one, MVV. I hope you are clear. So when to use MVVM approach? If you are dealing with large scale interactions, MVC approach. If you are dealing with large scale interactions, events, and lot of combination of separation issues will be there, then better go with MVC. If you are creating inline documents, simple interactions and validations you are dealing with, so then better go with MVVM. What is the drawback of MVVM? Drawback of MVVM, it can make the page heavy because all interactions are managed at UI level. It will take time. It will take time. So if there are many interactions, avoid using MVVM. Better use MVC approach, right? That is important. This is data binding related concept, data binding. While working with data binding, as I told you yesterday, how to bind different types of data now. Means if an array is coming, how to handle. So if an object is coming, string is coming, number is coming, how to handle them. For that, you need to understand another major concept related to components. We need Angular directives. We need to understand another major concept, Angular directives. Right. So what are Angular directives and how these directives will work? So technically, what are these directives? Let's see. I will explain the basic architecture. Actually, technically, directive is a function. Technically, directive is a function that can handle various interactions. Technically, directive is a function that can handle various interactions. Actually, Angular directive can do so many things, like it can return markup. Angular directive can return markup. It can extend markup. Directive can return markup, it can extend the markup, and it can make markup. It can make markup more interactive and responsive. That is what Angular directive can do. An Angular directive can return markup, can extend markup, and it can make the markup more interactive and responsive. So a directive can do three major things: returning markup, extending, and making the markup effective. So what does that means? I will tell you here. That means Angular directive can return a markup. For example, see, means I will show you one simple point. Actually, returning markup, extending markup means already we used some directives. Actually, the directives that we already used, so directive categories are so many, I will tell you. Suppose we have a directive called component directive. I will tell the categories about directives now. We will discuss about that. We have a component directive. You remembered we designed login component.ts. In this login component.ts, so what is the selector name? We have a selector. What is that? App login. That is the selector name for this component. Now what it will do? So it is going to return some HTML. It is going to return some HTML. Now very important is actually this app login is a directive. It is a directive. Now in any page, that means for example, we are using index page. When you are using index page, suppose we have index page. In index page, if I use app-login, then what it will do? If I use app login, what it will do? It will return that login presentation there. That means what this directive is doing? This directive is returning markup. That means when I use app login, what will happen? This login screen will come here now. Am I right? That means what is the role of directive here? It is returning markup. It is returning markup. That means we said app register. It shows register screen. So it returns register markup. App header, then it returns header. App footer, it returns footer. That means a directive, here a directive is returning markup. Not every time. For example, you have seen another directive. You have seen another directive, ng model, that is also directive. ng model is also a directive. But how we used this directive? Have I used ng model like this? I am not using ng model like a element. So I am using ng model how? Already there is a text box, input type text. Am I right? To this text box, I am adding a directive called ng model. I am adding a directive ng model. Here, what is the role of directive? What is the role of directive? Already this element is a static element. By adding this ng model, it is extending and making it dynamic. That means what is the role of directive here? It is extending markup. Understood? Here it is extending markup. That means some directives will return markup. Some directives will extend markup. They will extend markup. We have some more directives which will make markup more effective. That means, for example, suppose there is a div or span or anything, div. Now we can add a directive called ng class. What it will do is it can use a CSS class. When CSS class is used, what will happen to that element? It will become more interactive and it will become more responsive. That means in Angular, directive have lot of works to do. Angular directives, they can return markup. They can extend markup. They can make the markup interactive and responsive. All directives are not same. Every directive have different nature. Some directives return markup. Some directives extend markup. Some directives will make the markup interactive and responsive. So if anybody asked in interviews, what is the role of a directive in Angular? Compulsory question. Because in every Angular framework interviews, they ask what are directives, what directives you learnt, what is the purpose of this directive. They will ask several questions on directives, mandatory. So if anybody asked what is the purpose of a directive, what is the role of a directive in Angular? So you should say directive have three different roles. Three different roles. What are those? Directives will return markup. Directives will make the markup. They can extend the markup. They can make the markup more interactive and responsive. Will every directive return markup? No. Will every directive extend markup? No. Directives are different categories. Those we will see now. That means directive can do all these works, all these works, but every directive will not do. That means actually Angular directive can be used as, you can use as element, can be used as attribute, can be used as attribute, can be used as a class. We can use as a class also. A directive can be used as an element, it can be used as an attribute, or it can be used as a class. That means, for example of element, we use like this, app login. Am I right? This is like a element. So that means button, text box, they are written in an angle bracket, means we are using the directives as what? Elements. They are used as elements. Now another example for attribute. For attribute, if you have input type is equal to text, then we are using ng model. This is like attribute. Later you will learn about, suppose there is a div, we can use a attribute ng if, like that. We will discuss. These are used as what? These are used as attributes. A directive can be used as an element. A directive can be used as an attribute. A directive can be used as a class. Later you will learn about that. As a class means, generally what we do is in CSS file, we can means dot in CSS file. In CSS file, we can write like this, dot ng valid. We can write like dot ng some pristine, like this we can write, like dot ng dirty. These are used as classes. That means some directives are used as classes, some directives are used as elements, some directives are used as attributes. So they have various behaviors. Based on that, actually we can apply different effects. So Angular directives are categorized into different types. Actually, here the key point now, Angular provides several built-in directives. Angular provides several built-in directives and also allows to create custom directives. That means you can create your own directives. Already we created our own directives. We created a component. Every component is a directive actually. Technically speaking, every component in Angular is referred as a directive. Every component is referred as a directive. That means if anyone asks like, can you create custom directives? Of course, every component is a custom directive. Every component that you are creating is a custom directive. Later we will see other techniques also, but important, Angular provides several built-in directives. That means ready-made directives are there. We can directly use them. You don't need to create a directive. We can just use the directives. What is advantage? We can reduce the logic. We don't need to write much logic. Without writing the logic, we can implement the functionality by using directives because they are predefined in functionality. Several Angular directives are predefined in functionality, just we can implement and use them. So Angular provides several built-in directives. So Angular built-in directives are classified into two major groups. Later we will learn others also. Two major groups. One is we have structural directives. Another one we have attribute directives. Structural directives and attribute directives. Directives are categorized into two main groups. Several child subgroups also there, we will see them. So structural directives and attribute directives, these are very important to learn. Ready-made, these are already available. What are those directives we will see? Actually, first we will start with structural directives. How do we use these structural directives and work with them? Then we will go with attribute directives. What are structural directives? Actually, the concept of structural directive is simple. Structural directives are used for DOM manipulations. Structural directives are used for DOM manipulations. They are used for DOM manipulations. DOM manipulations means like adding element into DOM. Understood? adding element into DOM, removing elements from DOM, and another important, iterating elements in DOM. All these type of activities are done by structural directives. So Angular structural directives are used for handling DOM manipulations, like adding an element into DOM, removing element from the DOM, iterating the elements, repeating the elements. All such activities are done by structural directive. So they are used to control the DOM structure. Better don't say DOM manipulation. They are used for DOM structure. That is the best point. Actually, manipulation means some other concept will come which are not good, right? So DOM structure, they are used to control the DOM structure. Controlling the DOM structure means adding a new thing, removing anything from the DOM, and repeating the elements in the DOM. All such things it can do. And what are the structural directives? Angular structural directives are, we have Angular structural directives, we have ngIf. We have ngIf just like this I will give. We have like ngSwitch, and we have like another one is ngFor. These are the Angular structural directives. These are Angular structural directives. ngIf, ngSwitch, and ngFor. So how these are used means, see, what are the main purpose? Adding element into DOM, removing element from the DOM, and iterating elements in the DOM. These kind of things are enough to manage by using these three. These three are used for doing all the work, right? These three are responsible for managing the structure of DOM. Actually, to do other works, other directives are there, but these are the three directives for structure, managing the structure. How? Let's see how these are used. It's very simple. So one by one we will see. First we will see ngIf. What is the purpose of this? It is a structural directive used to add or remove. It is used to add or remove any element from DOM hierarchy. Add or remove any element from DOM hierarchy. It is used to add or remove any element from the DOM hierarchy. We can add any element, we can remove the element using ngIf. It is not like your if condition. It is different. Its purpose is adding and removing. Actually, it uses a Boolean value or expression. It uses a Boolean value or expression. You can use true, false, or you can use any expression that returns true, false. You can use a Boolean value or you can use a Boolean expression for that. And very important is, every structural directive is added to HTML element by using asterisk. Every structural directive is added to element by using asterisk. That means we have to use asterisk ngIf. We have to write like this, ngIf. Then it will use true or false. It will use a Boolean value. ngIf is true or false. It uses a Boolean value. Now, very important, it is responsible for adding and removing the element into DOM. I will show you that. Let's see. Actually, we will see a simple design here. So let's create one component for this. I will not disturb the existing things. Yeah, so let's add a component. So ng generate component if demo I am using. Skip test. Okay, if demo is the component I am adding. And let's keep if demo in the startup. If demo. if demo, okay, and in app module, we'll keep that if demo in the startup. So if demo is working fine. Now let's see, I have some assets, only Netflix JPG is there. Okay. Just I will copy into this assets folder. Means we have assets folder. We have the assets folder, and in this I will copy some images. Some images are there. I will copy some images into that folder. Some images are there. Some shoe. I will copy that image. Some shoe image is there. Okay. Just I copied one image there. Now let's go to the if demo component. This is our components. In that we have if demo. Okay. Yeah. In this if demo component, I am simply designing here a simple presentation div class container fluid and fluid. Yeah. And here we are having some product details. And here we will put a data list, data term name, data definition, some Nike casuals. Okay, and data term, some price, and data definition, some price. And here we have another data term. So here I will put a checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox. And here, so show preview. Show preview. This is there. And below this, there is a data definition. We have an image. Image have a simple source. It is in where? Assets. What is it? Shoe.jpg. So width is 100 and height also 100. This is a general image. Now what should happen? I don't want this shoe preview to display. I want to remove this image from the DOM and add only when it is selected. You might have learned in JavaScript jQuery like showing and hiding elements, but that is not satisfying because we put display height, display none. Hiding element will keep the element in the page, but will not show. That will not reduce the DOM burden. If any area is not in use, we should not hide it. We should remove it. That means I don't want image, then don't hide it. Generally Java up to JavaScript jQuery we used to hide, but not don't hide it, remove it from the DOM. Remove that image from the DOM. How to remove the image from the DOM? Just we have to use this div definition. I'm using asterisk ngIf. And I'm using here true. It's a Boolean value. If true, then it is showing because true is to add element into DOM. To remove element from the DOM, we have to use false. False means it removes the element from DOM. It is removing element from the DOM. And very important is, let's go inspect and check here. Inspect and here check. You will observe here, this is data list. In that last data term is show preview. Under that there is no data definition. Under that there is no data definition. You observe here, there is no data definition. It is not there. That means there is no data definition here. Because we given as what? False. So is it hiding? It is not hiding, it is removing. Now see, I will set it to true. I will set it to true. Then it becomes true. It will show, and you can see the data definition is added. Image is added. Previously it was not there. Now very important, this I need to control. This is a Boolean value now. Boolean value is just adding and removing. This I want to control through this checkbox. How to bind? It's very simple. How to collect the value from checkbox? You can use MVC approach or you can use MVVM approach. In MVC approach, what we have to do? Declare a property. So in that property, assign Boolean attached to the checkbox and the same attached to ngIf. But MVVM we learned without any controller we can manage. How? First we need to mark it as ng model. After that we need to have a name. What is it? Preview. So preview. So and here we will put another one. What is it? Hash. What is it? Preview is equal to what? Ng model. Now it becomes dynamic. That means this preview we will use here. What is the name? Preview. Preview dot value. Am I right? Because its value will return checked or not. We saw stock na true false. That depends on this value. That means currently if it is not checked, it will be false. If it is checked, it will be true. That means you will see now here show preview, it should display. And observe carefully, here data definition is added. And I remove that preview, it is removed, not hidden, removed. That element is removed. That reduces the burden on DOM. Generally, we are hiding the elements, but now we are adding or removing the elements. So why it is called structural directive? Because it is used to control the DOM structure by adding elements, removing elements. Now you can see, I click on this, it will be added now. I click on this, it will be removed. Right? Your wish, you depend on how you define. Suppose for this, what we are doing, class as form switch. So for this, I am giving a class as form check input. Then what happens? Form check input. Then it will be like a switch. Show preview, it will open. This will hide. That means we can turn on and turn off. I'm just using a image. In that place, there can be any lengthy box. You can put a login screen. You can put a registration screen. And you can say, select which one you want. Only that one will be added, not displayed. It is added. That means in a page, you are adding only the area that you need for that situation. That improves the performance. Improves the performance. Though that means suppose I want register login both. But both should not be there. Depends on what user selected. If user selected login, then add login screen. If user selected register, add register screen. That means can there be alternative for if? Yes. Just like you use ng if, just like you use if with else. Here also ng if can use then. Then and else blocks also we can use. That means when I turn off, instead of keeping empty, there I can put something else. That means on off, show one content. On, show another content. We can switch between contents. That means one for showing one content, another for showing another content. For that, you can use ng if with conditions also. We can see how to handle the conditions. So here, I used MVVM approach. If I have to use MVC approach, what should I do? Go to TS file. Here what we have to do, we have to create a property called what? Preview. Preview property type should be what? Boolean. Into that we need to set it false value. Am I right? Then how to bind this to the checkbox? To bind this to the checkbox. So you don't need model, name, all these things. You need only one thing. In the square brace, parenthesis, what is it? ng model. It is binded with which one? Preview. This is MVC approach. MVC approach. That means we are maintaining a separate option for that and we are displaying. And Boolean value, this time value is not required. Na? Preview dot value is not required because preview itself is a value. Value is not required. Show preview, it will add, it will hide. Same thing. So which one is best, that you decide according to your interface, whether to go with MVC or MVVM. If you are using MVC, then you need a controller, you need a property with a reference defined, and we have to use it. MVVM approach, that's what we have seen now, right? That means now when you are using MVVM approach, you don't need all this to handle. Then you don't need this to happen. What we have to define, ng model, we need a name. Name is what? Preview. Preview, yes. And here we need one more hash. What? Preview is equal to ng model. Now it is not only preview. Preview refers to the text checkbox. In that we have a value. That's how we need to define. This is enough. This example I will give you. So this is an example. Example for this is if demo dot component dot HTML. That's it. Now in if you have a lot of conditions also. If condition satisfied, one block, not satisfied, another. How to handle multiple blocks, that we'll see in next session. Right? Tomorrow we will discuss about some other examples using multiple decisions, how to handle them. That we'll see in next session. Okay? Right. Then we can create some good examples after understanding all these. Right? First you need to learn all this. Okay? Tomorrow we'll continue.